Hello, welcome to Cult Confessionals. My name is Sloane McCraw, and I am your host. And today I will be talking with
Dr. Mont Allen. I'm a professor here at SIU of classics and art history.
and Mont has graciously decided to join us on the couch for today. So I just personally want to ask first, of course you're a professor of classics, how did your interest for classics originally come around for yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably different strands influenced my love of the ancient world. Part of it was simply growing up with a father who loved old movies, and so I saw so many, especially 1960s sword and sandal epics set in the ancient world, like Spartacus and Ben-Hur and The Robe. So I think part of it was just seeing so many of these movies as a kid. And part of it, too, was growing up in Europe. My parents were not soldiers, but they worked for the U.S. Army overseas, and we did a lot of traveling. And so I had the privilege, even as a young kid, to spend summers traveling with my parents. And that often involved going to the Mediterranean world and spending time among the ruins and the monuments surviving from ancient Rome. So as a kid, that had a huge effect on me.
Yeah.
In fact, one little anecdote on that regard, if I could, just as backstory, and I swear this is related, although at first it's going to seem a little out there. So my dad was a U.S. Olympic athlete and one of the fittest people in terms of his immune system. I mean, the guy never got sick. He's had a fever twice in his adult life, only twice. And one of those two times was when we were traveling in Italy. I was 8 years old at the time. And the three of us, my mom, my dad, and I, were in the ruins of the ancient Roman town of Herculaneum, which, along with Pompeii, is one of the two ancient Roman cities or towns that got buried from the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius.
Yeah.
And so there we were, and going through Herculaneum with a tour group, but my dad was just not looking good. And all of a sudden, he just leaves the tour group and he wanders over to a stretch of ancient Roman wall just on the side of the street and just laid down atop the stretch of wall. And, as a kid who'd never seen my dad sick or ill, this just left such an impression that actually decades later, when I visited Herculaneum for the first time myself as an adult, my memory of that spot was so strong that I was actually able to find it, even though at this point it was some 35 years later.
Yeah.
And I actually got to pull out my cell phone and call my dad on the spot and describe to him, Dad, if you enter Herculaneum through this gate, take your first right, go down about 200 meters, take the third left, and it's a kind of wall by a grassy area off on the right. Is that the spot? And he just laughed and laughed on the phone and said, yeah, that's it. No, I don't know if he really remembered or if he was just humoring me.
Yeah.
But experiences like that are just so memorable as a child.
Yeah, it really is that marker. So
Yeah.
you have gotten the chance to sort of live in these spaces essentially and just
Yes.
experience it.
Yeah, it's been a great privilege.
So where are you from originally then, like specifically?
Well, my parents were both public school teachers on the huge American Army base in Germany, in a town named Mannheim. And so, these overseas American bases were so huge during the height of the Cold War that they had to provide all the normal services and infrastructure you'd need to provide just massive kind of American cities overseas. So my parents just taught at the schools over there. My dad taught American U.S. history. So I grew up there 18 years in this bizarre artificial environment that is an overseas American Army base of 25,000 people, smack in the middle of Germany. 25,000 people, so it's almost exactly the same size as Carbondale.
Okay, yeah.
A little American island. Bizarre world, but, again, it offered opportunities for travel that you just would not have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, I've talked with a lot of people who have grown up on army bases like that, and it is a very different feeling because it's almost like you are growing up in a different country in a bubble that is America.
Yes, a bubble. It is such a bubble. It's the perfect word for it. It's a little island it's a kind of surreal existence. So I'd never lived in the U.S. at all until I came to the U.S. for college.
Oh, wow.
18, graduated high school and left Germany and went over to Berkeley, California to start my undergrad.
Oh, wow.
And that was quite the culture shock, as you can imagine.
How was that experience like specifically? Just for was it more of a like media cultural difference, or was it just in relation to other people? Just how was your experience coming for college?
Well, growing up in the American Army base is a strange experience. Because on one hand, you're in the middle of Europe, which is almost, it's cosmopolitan almost by definition.
Yeah.
Countries are smaller, borders are much closer. You can be in any number of countries in a few hours' drive.
Yeah.
But the Army base in particular is exactly the opposite. It's insular. All of the news is provided by the U.S. military, so it's very strictly curated and highly propagandized. Everybody there works for the same employer, and so to leave that and to come to a really cosmopolitan, alternative, leftist Berkeley in the San Francisco Bay Area was just a huge expanding of my horizons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how was your experience through college? And you studied classics in college, or?
Sloane, you're nice to ask. No, I actually got a BA in geography at my undergrad. And my first master's degree was in kind of comparative religion. And then my second master's degree was in modern European history. And then my third master's and my PhD was in ancient Roman art history.
Okay.
So I think I've got 5 degrees in 4 different subjects.
Okay.
So I don't know. I just find just about anything interesting. And it took me a long time to find something that would hold my interest, sustained fashion for years and years, and, enough to be something worthwhile pursuing forever.
Yeah.
But eventually, the field of ancient Roman art history put its claws into me and has never let go.
I think while it's not all entirely encapsulated, every degree they have is not entirely encapsulated within like classics specifically. I think those are all the surrounding factors. I mean, knowing geography and just religious histories is, clearly very linked to it.
Yes, they're absolutely linked. And in retrospect, I realized that there was a kind of common thread going through them all, even if at the time I was not aware of what they were. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of nice. It's nice when you can look back at your life and realize that there was a common thread there, even if you couldn't see it at the moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It gives me more hope that if in the present I feel that things are kind of random and chaotic, that, in another decade looking back at now, too, I'll realize that there still is a commonality there. And there's kind of comfort in that, I think.
Oh, yeah. So, of course, coming from an Army base in Germany to Berkeley, how did you find your way over to Carbondale?
Well, I got the PhD in 2014, and I was offered a job here straight out of the gate.
Really?
And that's kind of unusual these days, especially in the humanities. Mm-hmm. Normally, faculty may spend 1, 2, 3, several years kind of floating from 1 or 2 year position to 1 or 2 year position. But to get offered a tenure track job right from the start is unusual, and you don't turn it down. Mm-hmm. It's like getting the jackpot. So when I was offered the position here at Carbondale, I leapt on it. Yeah. And I never kind of imagined that I would spend the rest of my life, it seems, in a kind of middle-sized town in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. But I think like a lot of us, I've come to appreciate Carbondale. Oh, yeah. It's really grown on me. And I've had friends describe it as a kind of black hole, and that once you come here, you never get out, but you're kind of okay with that. Yeah. And I think that describes it really well. Yeah. So there's a lot I like about living in this kind of smallish town of ours.
Truly the interstellar of towns.
The interstellar of towns. Yeah, that's right.
So when you got the job, did you come to Carbondale first or anything to check out what the area was like, or was it just straight off like grabbing it and going?
Well, they did fly me in for an interview and a visit.
Okay.
And that was a bit of a blur because I was living in Berlin in Germany at the time, finishing up my PhD dissertation. And so I think I'd been, underway in taxis and subways and planes and van shuttles for about 36 hours when I arrived here.
Wow.
And I was jet lagged out of my gourd, as you can imagine. And then being thrown into just meeting all the people and seeing the facilities was, epically exciting, but also just a complete blur.
Oh, yeah.
But they did invite me here. I liked the facilities. I love Thompson Woods. I love the lake. The colleagues that I met here were eminently friendly. And so I went back to Berlin feeling much more certain that I would take the position than when I'd first come here or before I'd come here.
And I know you, I've heard something about you running a class with Professor Doc Johnson. And I was just curious, were you here before Dr. Johnson, or were you roughly the same time as each other? Or?
Oh, you're nice to ask. Yeah, Dr. Johnson, he's one of my good colleagues here in classics. He and I are really the two faculty members here in classics. He was here before.
Okay.
He was part of the team that hired me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he is a fantastic colleague and a pleasure to work with. He treated me like an equal right from the start, even though he was much more kind of advanced in his career than me. And so we've collaborated on curriculum and classes ever since.
Yeah.
So, how did you hear about this class that he and I are thinking about team teaching next semester, out of curiosity?
I was told by one Drake Martin.
Oh, Drake. Yeah, he's another RTD major, isn't he? And a classics minor, I think.
I have very many paths to gain information, which is why I started the show.
I see. Your network goes deep, huh?
A little bit. It's an ongoing joke. Diondre's making an opening hand motion at me for how long my network is.
The massive expanding network.
Just mean that's what I'm doing here in a media arts college.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's an important skill to have. Yeah.
But me aside, and me gaining information that maybe shouldn't be fully known aside.
We can cut that out.
So you like it here in Carbondale teaching at SIU?
I do. One of the great things about being here is that I get the opportunity to teach classes that I want to teach.
Oh, yeah.
And that is not something that I ever want to take for granted. Because a lot of faculty elsewhere don't have that luxury. They're forced to teach courses that they may not necessarily want to. But I'm given a lot of latitude to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So I can teach the large introductory survey courses that I love, such as the Introduction to Ancient Art History course and my beloved Greek mythology class.
Yes.
But I also get to teach specialized courses on my own topic. For example, an entire course on ancient Roman coffins, ancient Roman sarcophagi, which is my own research focus. But that class is specialized enough that you would not imagine most American universities would find it worthwhile to offer that. I mean, there are 3 other colleagues of mine in all of North America who study Roman coffins.
Oh, wow.
But none of them is given the space and the time to offer a class like that.
Okay.
But I can. So thank you, SIU.
Yeah. And if anyone's looking for a class for Roman coffins?
That's right.
Yes.
I'll be offering it next fall if you're interested.
Yes. I think it's a very interesting topic because, of course, I don't know anything about it, but I was in a Roman Civ class, and we did talk about the burial methods and everything for a little bit.
Was that here?
Yes.
With Dr. Johnson, I'm guessing.
Okay. I was taking a Roman Civ class with Doc Johnson. It was asynchronous online, and I ended up withdrawing, sadly.
Oh, no.
Not out of disinterest, but just some other issues in my personal life.
Sure.
But it's definitely a class I would take again.
Yeah, good.
Maybe not online. I think that was more the issue for myself, just
Was this during the COVID years too?
no, this was this semester.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, online classes have their own set of difficulties and challenges,
yeah.
and it's much harder to keep motivated in them.
Mm-hmm.
I understand.
But it's definitely of interest, and I definitely gained a few things from it. Not that I'm disinterested is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
I
no,
do
of course.
find it all very
absolutely.
cool. Life just happens.
Yeah, it does.
I feel like that's a good realm of professionalism through. So just thinking about personally for yourself, just your interest. And of course, I know your interests lie within classics.
Yes.
But just in general, what you fill your personal time with and go from there.
That's right. I do. I'd love to tell you more about my own research or what got me into this, if you think we have the space for it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, just most broadly, as you might guess from degrees in the study of religion and history as well as art history, I'm just fascinated by how humans make meaning in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And in my own case, that's involved, on the one hand, a study of mythology, on the other hand, the study of death.
Okay.
Because I think those are two privileged ways of getting access to how other peoples and cultures have found meaning in the world.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, the study of death, I mean, it's pretty obvious once you think about it that death is the only thing that gives life meaning.
Yeah.
I think about this quite a lot. The only reason that we ascribe meaning to anything at all in life is because we know that eventually our time here will end.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only because of that anything that we do has any significance or weight whatsoever. You know, as I often kind of imagine our students to think. I mean, for example, if we actually lived forever, if all of us were truly immortal,
Yeah.
nothing that we did at any given moment would ever have any significance or meaning or weight at all, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't get up out of bed today, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it tomorrow. If something does not work out, well, so what? You can try again. If something goes spectacularly, well, so what? Eventually, given enough tries, if you had ultimate infinite time, it would have gone spectacularly. So on one hand, the fact that our life is bounded and confined, constricted, gives significance to it. And if we were actually immortal, we would just get bored out of our gourds, right? We would, honestly. Yeah. I think often, and I think here, this is where J.R.R. Tolkien, famous novelist of Lord of the Rings and other books, is such a profound thinker. I love his notion that the elves, who in Tolkien's world are immortal, often end up dying of boredom or heartache. Because they live in a world in which everything else that they love dies. Elves fall in love with humans, but humans die. Elves fall in love with trees, but trees eventually pass. And so, as creatures that live forever in a world that doesn't, many of them eventually give up all will to live because they either grow weary of boredom or they grow weary through heartbreak.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, I'm going off on a long tangent here, but on one hand, how cultures view death gives us such insight into how those cultures and people make sense of life itself.
Yeah.
And the same is true of mythology. And this is, I think, is a little bit harder for us moderns to appreciate, Sloane, because we tend to imagine myth as being a set of stories that are interesting, but ultimately of no relevance to the present. But that's not how the Greeks and the Romans view it. For them, the stories of the Greek and Roman gods and heroes are stories that they use and they retell to imagine their own place in the world. They use them as metaphors for thinking about their own positions in the world and what it means to be alive and what it means to be dead. And so my own research, Roman coffins, is the perfect intersection of those.
Yeah.
Because Romans loved to carve scenes from Greek mythology on their coffins as a way to make sense of their own lives and of their deaths.
Yeah.
So that's kind of long-winded reason to kind of explain why I find myth and death and art, such a kind of profound intersection, and how Roman sarcophagi combines all three of those strands perfectly.
Wow. That is incredibly interesting. And I do agree that death gives ultimately meaning to life, and you bring up a lot of good points. And I love a Lord of the Rings reference on any day.
Oh, you do? Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, no, Tolkien is such a profound thinker.
Yes. And
Which of his books do you like the most?
I'm not a very common reader. I don't read books often.
But you like Lord of the Rings.
I like Lord of the Rings a lot.
Yeah.
That's generally where I pick up anything, and my partner has just started reading them all.
Yeah, great.
They're getting through them really quickly.
Right, they are good. I mean, they're long, but they will draw you in.
Yeah. I always think of the fact that Tolkien created orcs as the way we perceive like what an orc is in fantasy.
Yes, that's right. You think of any orc in modern fantasy movies, in Dungeons and Dragons, and almost any video game. And yeah, what we're doing is channeling Tolkien's created invention of an orc. The man's had such a profound influence on us. I found myself thinking about that a lot, actually, because just as another aside, I've played Dungeons and Dragons for years.
I was about to ask. I'd heard.
You had from whom? Should I ask?
I believe Rob Spar told me.
Oh, thank you, Rob. Yes, I mean, even as far back, I think, as 1982, when I was 12 years old, I was looking at the books for what was then Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And I've played on and off for years. And I've had the great privilege the last 9 years here in SIU to get together with a bunch of other SIU faculty, including some in the College of Arts and Media, for a campaign. But I'd never dungeon mastered. Oh. Never. Because, look, it seemed daunting. Oh, yeah. Right? The number of extra rules that you have to read, and your ability to create a world, but also to lead characters through it spontaneously. But I told myself that if I ever got tenure here, that one of the gifts I would give myself with tenure was to finally plunge into learning to be a dungeon master. And so that time has come. And in fact, my very first time leading my group of SIU faculty, and you know who you are if you're listening to this, friends, my first time leading them through an adventure as a dungeon master was actually 3 days ago.
Oh,
right,
wow.
This very Tuesday. So I'm still kind of flying high from that experience.
Yeah, that's incredible. I've been playing D&D personally for about 7-8 years now.
Okay.
And
5th edition the whole time?
5th edition, but I also have a large fascination with the cyberpunk tabletop RPG.
Okay.
So I used to play Cyberpunk 2020 a lot, and then I picked up Cyberpunk Red, and I have the book memorized back to front.
You do? Okay. I confess, I don't know that at all.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
It's just that dark future-y kind of Blade Runner inspired. But
you play both still?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Riley is starting a D&D campaign with us pretty soon.
Oh, he is? Riley Needham?
Yes.
Oh, Riley. Great. Tell me about it the next time I see you in class.
Oh, he's got a lot of lore ready.
He does? Okay, good.
So I'm glad your DMing experience went well. Was it a one shot, or are you continuing?
I'm going to continue it, and you'll laugh at this. It's not surprising, but it's set in the Roman world.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, of course, D&D is optimized for high fantasy and the vaguely Tolkien-inspired, vaguely European medieval period. But I know the Roman world best.
That's fair.
And so what I wanted to do was set it in the Roman world so that I don't have to spend time creating the geography and the landscapes and the architecture. I can just plunk my characters down into real Roman bathhouses, the Colosseum, aqueducts, real Roman catacombs and crypts, which I know so well. So, why not have a dungeon crawl in which the dungeons they're crawling through are ancient Roman catacombs? Yeah. Seeing Roman sarcophagi, for example. So my players will see that. One of the interesting design choices, though, if you don't mind me telling you about it, that I had to go through was incorporating the D&D well, they used to call them races, but now they're called species.
Yeah.
Into this world. I mean, how am I going to take the D&D species and translate them into a real historical reality that was the Roman Empire? And so I thought, well, why don't I do this? I will use humans as the kind of default inhabitants of Italy and Greece itself. They'll be the Greeks and Romans. But all the other major playable species I mapped onto the various other ethnic groups of the Roman Empire,
Okay.
the provinces, and the other people beyond the empire's borders. So the various realms of Britain and France and the very northwestern part of the empire are all elves.
Yeah.
The German barbarians to the north are dwarves. The ancient Scythians on the northeast are orcs.
Okay.
The ancient Persians are Wanti, and so on. So I had a lot of fun taking the various ethnic groups of the empire and then mapping them onto species.
Oh, yeah. I'm curious about what the party is like. Like what? I find it funny we're talking about D&D fully now. Oh, also, what edition are you playing?
We're playing 5th, and I realize this is the worst possible time to start DMing because 5th is just about to be replaced, right?
Is it? I have not been keeping the Wizards at all.
I'm sorry to tell you, Sloane. From what I hear, it's supposed to be replaced. So, oh well, this is just how it works. Yeah, were you were curious though about party makeup?
Yeah, what was your party consisting of, and how does that fall within your world that you're?
Yeah, so the background for my campaign is going to be that it's a relatively low magic world.
Okay.
And as a result, my characters decided to opt more for more martial fighter classes and related ones than casters and magic users. So of the 4 that we have, only one is a full-time caster, and that is our wizard, whose species is a Wanti, one of the serpent-like people, which in my world are identified with the Persians to the east, the traditional enemies of the Romans. But our other 3 are a shifter barbarian.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's playing one of the quasi-werewolf playable species as a barbarian. We have a fully human paladin from Italy itself, from the heart of Rome. And then the 4th player is a wood elf ranger named Cassian, coming from the British realm, from the kind of gloomy Isle of Britain, off in the very northwestern part of the empire. So we're going to be heavy on combat types, kind of weak on casters, but I think that'll fit well the low magic nature of this. Yeah.
So I find it funny that the paladin of the group is representative of Italy and Rome.
Right, exactly, yes.
That fits so well.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly. Out of curiosity, what kind of characters do you like playing personally?
I have this knack for creating characters who are, like myself, very punk and just anti-authoritarian.
Okay.
So the character I have for Riley's campaign, and I have to request now that I know everyone who is in that campaign is listening to this podcast. Listen at your own caution.
The truth comes out, huh?
Because I've not talked about this character yet, and everyone else has returning characters.
Oh,
so
okay.
It's a semi-surprise, but it really doesn't matter. But my current character that I've been working with is if I can remember what species she is, but she is a wild magic barbarian that I love very much, and it's this whole thing where like she has all these tattoos that correlate to the chaos magic stuff that she brings out. So whenever she rages, she has the chance to release a chaos magic type.
Is this subclass? It's not in the player handbook.
It is in Tasha's.
It's in Tasha's. Interesting. So it introduces a casting element to the barbarians?
Essentially. I mean, there was another one that had a casting element for a barbarian, but this one is it's not quite casting. You rage, and then
Yeah.
you have the chance for it to happen. Or in book, you rage, and it automatically will happen every time. But
Oh, it is.
we've homebrewed it
Interesting.
a little bit to where you will automatically, because in the book you automatically do it, and it's a good effect. It's always a good
Okay.
effect. But we were like,
Make it a bit more chaotic.
yeah, let's do it. You always get the good effect, but if you at the same time do the sorcerer thing where you roll, and if you roll a 1 on a d20,
Oh,
then
it's-
you'll
yeah, I
full
see.
chaos.
Oh, that is great. And so it corresponds to the tattoos of your character?
Yeah, I just ended up giving them tattoos that correlated to the in-book reasons.
Nice.
So they all are like magical, and I got that from Tasha. Also introduces these magic tattoos that like give you special abilities and spells.
I love that idea. And I love the idea that it's tattooed directly on your own body, so that the tattoo on your body becomes a channel
Yeah.
for, well, I guess, unleashing or channeling these energies. That's a great notion.
The tattoo idea came from a previous character I had that was a Furbolg druid who had a home place in a forest and woods very far, but to get to it they had a teleportation circle scribed on their back and a tattoo to where if they would raise their arms and bring them all the way back down to their sides, it would activate the teleportation circle and they could travel.
What a neat idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a great break from the traditional, somatic component
Oh,
or vocal
yeah.
component of traditional D&D, which is great. But again, I love the notion that it's somehow inscribed on your body itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's a great show of physically of character and also
Yes.
just an element to add.
Yeah, that's great. Do you dungeon master yourself?
I used to dungeon master. I started with a group of friends in middle school, and I was dungeon mastering from there all the way. I started a D&D club in my high school, and I was DMing for that. And then I came to college, and I pretty much stopped DMing
Okay.
for the longest time. And I think it was mostly at the time I started picking up Cyberpunk more, and Cyberpunk Red
okay.
came out.
Okay.
I fell in love with the system, and
Okay.
it's just
Okay. Does it seem more elegant than D&D 5e?
not elegant. It's very gritty.
Okay.
It's very unforgiving. It has this system where if your character dies, you will not be revived ever.
Okay. Okay. I've just been talking about this a lot with my own players because when D&D first began in the 70s, it was far grittier and far more
yes.
deadly. It was typical for characters not to survive, and in fact, it was so common that players would often bring multiple characters with them to a session, so that if one died, you could just pull the next one out. And over the years, every edition has moved further and further away from that. But sometimes I think that it loses a little bit of the gravitas or the kind of existential dread, or at least greater weight that comes when your character might actually die. So.
I think this is a great way to loop back into the conversation about death and having meaning.
Right. Oh, yeah, you're right. I hadn't realized that.
Because I can quickly talk about Cyberpunk and
Yeah,
how that
please.
works. And there's this entire notion within the genre itself that life is so fragile and quick, and especially in this like dark dystopian world in the future where people are changing their bodies in so many different ways, and it's always style over substance. So
Okay.
the reason you're doing it is never fully, oh, this will help me do this thing. I can have these talon claws so I can climb walls. I can have these talon claws because they look really cool on my hands.
Okay.
So it's this
Okay.
idea of modification, and then also this fleetingness of life where you're against all these like mega corporations, and the entire thing is just you're going out in a blaze of glory. And every Cyberpunk game I've been in has always ended up where not a happy ending, and it's a happy ending in quotations where the
Okay.
characters are either reduced in mass of a group by almost 3/4 of what they are, or they all die.
Okay.
And it's
okay.
just a big fiery just completion. It's a memento to them.
Okay, and so I guess if players know this going in, that they're not going to be traumatized too much by a total party kill, for example.
You'd be surprised, because there's also this idea in groups that I've done where I'm not going to intentionally try to kill you. If it happens, it happens. But if you are like, I want to die and start playing a different character, I want this character to go really big. I've done that for someone before.
Okay.
And it was the most heartbreak because they had been going on for about 3 months at the time.
Okay.
And it was just this sinking pit, essentially, at the table when they essentially just took an entire building with them in this giant explosion.
Okay.
And it was
An epic way to go out.
Oh yes, but it was great. But everyone had grown attached to the character, and they could feel it.
Yes. Yeah. No, you do get attached to the character, don't
Yes, absolutely. And especially if you're writing them as detailed as it's getting more common to. I feel like tabletop games are
you?
reaching that.
They are, and it occurs to me part of that reason too. I think that it's so easy now to give them even greater presence is because image generators like Midjourney and others allow you now with a few prompts to have generated for you a visual image of your character.
Or Hero Forge.
Or Hero Forge to make the minis. Yeah, exactly. So those are great tools for this.
Mm-hmm. We are getting to a point.
A wrap-up time?
Yeah, sadly.
Okay, too bad. Well,
I know. I'm really enjoying our D&D conversation.
Yeah, me too. This has been a pleasure.
But especially thinking about the way it wraps up with the idea of death and having characters that are in some ways doomed to die, but also are given the glory of death.
The glory of death. And the Greeks would have absolutely understood that. Yeah. And we're back to mythology, too, because that's what these games allow us to create and to inhabit, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect.
So
thanks for the chance to speak here, Sloane. Appreciate it.
But we're not quite through yet. There's always one thing. This is a cult confessional, after all.
Okay.
So I must ask you, Mont, for your cult confession. So you have to give us one little thing to tell that is just your, however you want to describe confession.
My confession?
Yes.
As I stare like a deer into headlights here, you can give me a second to think, I assume? Because you can edit this out, right? This pause?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I guess I can confess this. Should I go ahead?
Yes.
A cult confession, huh? So I'm a grown-up goth kid. Which meant that when I was younger, back in my undergrad days, especially when I was going out clubbing, I would occasionally just go in full goth regalia, the black fingernail polish, all the chains and crosses and crucifixes, the spider rings, the black eyeliner, the black lipstick, the mini skirts and fishnets. And although I don't dress like that much anymore, I feel a little awkward walking into a classroom to teach like that. Occasionally, when Hangar 9 or some other club here has a goth night, I still get the opportunity to pull out all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I love the kind of wide open eyes I get from not so much friends, but students that I see there, right? Who are used to see me in a slightly different context, and have never seen their professor kind of gothed out in this full way. So if that's a cult confessional, yeah, I guess that's what I'd say. Will that do?
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, Dr. Allen or Mont.
Sloane, Diondre, a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us for another Cult Confessional. We missed our last spot 2 weeks ago, but we are right back on it again. So thank you. And thanks again, Mont, for joining us. See you again soon.
Thanks for the invitation to come here. Bye-bye now.